please all stand. Coroners Court is now sitting.
Good morning. Yes, Mr. Castleton.
Thank you, Honour. Before I commence, would Your Honour please take appearances? There's a new party joining today.
Yes, I'll just take appearances, please. I understand, Mr.
Your Honour, Sakalis, I appear on behalf of Megan McPaul, the wife of the late Samuel McPaul. Sorry, I'm not seeing any video stream at the moment, so apologies for any delay in announcing my appearance.
No, that's fine. Leave is granted, Mr. Sakalis. Thank you, Ms. Castleton.
Your Honour, this is the inquiry into the cause and origin of the Green Valley Talmalmo fire in the Greater Hume local government area encompassed within the lands of the Wiradjuri people. Your Honour, the Green Valley fire burned for approximately 8 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 46,000 hectares. Tragically, an RFS firefighter, Samuel McPaul, died while fighting this fire. The inquest into his death will be heard immediately following this inquiry. The court will hear from that the fire started in an area bounded by Woomagama National Park, a private property named Avoca, and a pine plantation. Woomagama National Park, Your Honour, is situated 30 kilometres east of Albury. The fire commenced at around 4:30 p.m. on Sunday, 29 December 2019, and progressed southeast towards and over the Murray River border with the state of Victoria. Your Honour, I'll just have displayed now a Google Earth map of the general area to which I've just referred. And just to assist Your Honour in terms of important locations, Your Honour will see in the top left-hand corner of that satellite image 2 blue markers. They are lightning strikes that were recorded at around 4:28 p.m. On the 29th of December 2019. Between those 2 blue markers representing the lightning strikes, to the right, Your Honour, will see a green and a orange or yellow marker. They indicate possible areas of origin for the commencement of the fire. Your Honour, in the bottom left-hand corner, Your Honour will see a pink marker. That's the property Avoca. And then if Your Honour tracks to the right, Your Honour will come towards the bottom of the satellite image, a further pink marker, and that is the Lightwood property, and that's the property that Samuel McPaul was working at, attending the fire when a fire-generated vortex hit that general area. And then Your Honour sees River Road, which runs along and close to the Murray River, which of course is the border with Victoria. Your Honour, the evidence will likely show that the cause of the fire was, as I said a moment ago, lightning strike. The fire burnt until it was declared to be out by the RFS on the 19th of February 2020. As has been set out in the opening to all of these proceedings, the purpose of this fire inquiry is to identify the cause and origin of the Green Valley fire. This tranche of hearings will not inquire into any issues related to the fires more broadly, including, for example, any that relate to the response and management of the fires. As set out in the opening to these proceedings, should particular issues emerge from the investigation into the fires that may require further inquiry, consideration will be given to addressing them in the form of a case study analysis in the second tranche of these proceedings scheduled for hearing next year. Your Honour, the fire was first observed by Kelly Scheitler, who lives on River Road at Talmalmo. She received 3 notifications on an app called Lightning Strike at 4:19 p.m, 4:20 p.m and 4:28 p.m. on Sunday, 29 December 2019. Kelly's husband, Reeves, drove out to the locations of the lightning strikes on his motorbike. He saw smoke rising from within the property known as Avoca. Kelly called 000 and reported the fire. She then notified Stuart Greenhill, captain of the Talmalmo RFS Brigade. The following, Your Honour, is a photograph of the origin of the fire taken from a Parks Victoria helicopter at 6:14 p.m. on the 29th of December 2019. And Your Honour will see there a ridge line and that it's quite inaccessible and steep, rugged terrain in that part of the National Park. Your Honour, the officer in charge of the investigation is of the opinion that the lightning strike recorded at 4:28 p.m. was responsible for igniting the Green Valley fire. When the RFS first attended the location of the fire, it was around 10 to 15 acres in size. The RFS attempted to contain the fire. The following day, that is Monday, the 30th of December, the conditions deteriorated. Mark Reeves, RFS member of the Lankeys Creek Brigade, informed investigating police in his statement the following. As things wore on, the winds were picking up a lot and it was getting very hot. I could see the fire getting bigger and I could tell we were in for a shit fight as it went on. The fire had been contained, but by this time it started getting away along the western side of Mount Jingellic and had jumped its containment lines. At this time, the wind was howling and hot and really driving the fire in the direction of the southeast, heading towards Talmalmo. The court has also the benefit of the statement given to New South Wales Police by John Hawkins. He was a group captain who led a strike team of RFS on the afternoon of 29 December. John Hawkins states in his statement, at this time, that is around 5:30 to 6 p.m, the weather was hot. I would estimate around 40 degrees or so, and there wasn't a lot of wind about, but what wind was, there was very turbulent due to the storm activity. The fire front was about 400 metres away from us and had probably grown to about 30 to 40 acres in size, and the flame height was about a metre high. We couldn't get close to it due to the intense heat it was generating, and we needed a dozer to clear access to it. The following morning, John Hawkins returned to the Green Valley fire ground and observed that the fire conditions had deteriorated further. A number of RFS witnesses explained that in the early afternoon of 30 December, the fire broke through the containment lines on the northeastern front. Mr Hawkins says that these conditions, at around this time, that is 2 p.m, they were trying to put a fire break in further down the hill to contain the fire as it was slowly running that way. Due to the steep terrain, this was very difficult, and the only accessible place for the dozer was some 1 or 2 kilometres away from the southwestern edge of the fire. We started putting this break in there. Just as we had started, a message came over the radio that the fire had jumped the containment line in the northeastern corner and was getting away. Mr Hawkins further says that efforts were made to contain the fire, but the conditions and wind were just too bad and the fire got away and was spotting a good 100 metres ahead of us in areas where we could not get into. Another RFS member, Jason Mcbain, explained how the fire progressed on the afternoon of 30 December. Mr Mcbain says in his statement at around 2 p.m, the wind were gusty, swirling, strong winds from the west, and it was pushing the fire in an easterly direction at a great rate of knots. All attempts to contain the eastern fire front was too dangerous and inaccessible. On this day, that is the 30th of December, the fire crossed the Murray River and descended into Victoria. Your Honour, I now come to the extreme and rare weather event at Jingellic on the 30th of December 2019 that was responsible for Samuel McPaul's death. The fire progressed south towards the Gingelic area on the northern bank of the Murray River. A number of RFS brigades were deployed to protect property in this region. The weather on 30 December was reported from Albury Airport. There was a significant increase in wind and the temperature. And I'll just bring up a table which shows some of the changes in weather. Your Honour will see in the highlighted portion of Table 2 the wind speed and wind direction in the afternoon of the 29th of December, which is when the fire is thought to have first ignited. And Your Honour will see the low relative humidity of 4% to 11%. And Your Honour has got those bad north to northwest winds with gusts of up to 24 kilometres per hour. And then if we go over to the following day, Your Honour, to the 30th of December, between 12 midday and 6 p.m, Your Honour will see that there's a change in wind direction. It's now tracking from the south. You've got gusting of up to 54 kilometres per hour. And again, Your Honour will see quite high temperatures, 39 to 41 degrees, and again, very low relative humidity of 7 to 8%. Your Honour, at around 5:45 p.m, on the 30th of December 2019, a fire-generated vortex, otherwise known as a FGV, descended on a property known as Lightwood, near to Gingelic. A number of RFS members were on this property at the time, including the vehicle and crew of Colcan NW2A. And I'll just show you a map of that general area. Your Honour will see the Murray River. Your Honour will see the blue marker just to the left of a red marker, and that's the Lightwood property in that general vicinity between the red and the blue markers. Your Honour, the brief of evidence contains two comprehensive reports produced by the Bureau of Meteorology in relation to the extreme winds and fire weather interaction processes that occurred on 30 December 2019. The Bureau of Meteorology defines such winds as fire-generated vortices or fire whirls, which are upright columns of rapidly rotating air which form over fire grounds due to the interactions between the fire, topography and the ambient weather conditions. Further, the reports found that the environment surrounding Green Valley was favourable for the development of FGVs due to an unstable atmosphere, the presence of high-based pyrocumulus clouds indicating strong updrafts above high-intensity fire activity, moderate, that is not strong, environmental winds above the surface, and the location of the fire in the lee in the ridge line. The report states that wind speeds consistent with that of a Category EF3 tornado were experienced. That is, Your Honour, winds between 220 to 260 kilometres per hour. And it is possible that these winds reached that of a Category EF4 tornado, that is up to 320 kilometres per hour. The Bureau of Meteorology has found that the likely formation areas for the FGVs on 30 December 2019 in Green Valley were as set out in the following aerial photograph, Your Honour. And Your Honour will see two polygons. In the top left-hand corner, there's a yellow polygon. That's the FGV that developed at about 5:45 p.m. on Monday the 30th of December and is thought to be the relevant FGV that was responsible for Mr McPaul's death. And Your Honour sees a yellow marker which has the approximate position of the RFS truck that Mr McPaul was in and that was overturned. And then down to the bottom right-hand corner in Victoria, near Walmar, is a further polygon where it's believed a further fire generator vortex hit that area later that day on the 30th of December 2019. The Bureau of Meteorology reports documented the various witness accounts of the FGV and are summarised as follows. The path of destruction was about 50 to 60 metres wide, running from the base of Green Valley Mountain through the property Lightwood, across the Murray River, and then some 1.5 kilometres further to the southeast. The destructive winds were short-lived, lasting for a few minutes only. The overturned fire truck was located approximately in the middle of the damaged swathe. The fire tornado had burnt and sucked everything from the ground. Trees in the damaged path were torn out of the ground and thrown, in some cases, 100 metres to the south. The fire truck's light bar was found approximately 85 metres south of the truck, and the windscreen, damaged but largely intact, was found 60 metres to the south. A number of the RFS members witnessed and experienced the fire-generated vortex. RFS Group Captain John Hawkins described what he saw. As I looked up the hill, I could see a large whirlwind or tornado starting to build up. It was a large column of black smoke swirling in a clockwise direction and throwing burning logs and sticks and leaves out into the surrounding paddocks. I hadn't seen anything like this tornado before. I had seen small fire whirlwinds, but nothing like this one. I guess it would have been easily a few kilometres high and maybe 2 kilometres wide. It was stationary at the foot of the hill, and there was a valley to the north of it that seemed to be feeding air into it. RFS firefighter Peter Jed Taylor informed the police in his statement, about 5:30 p.m, I observed the fire that was on grassland was burning from the north to the west. The flames were standing straight up, but the smoke in the bushland on the mountain was starting to spin from the north around to the west. The spinning smoke was around 4 to 5 kilometres across, and from lack of a better terminology, the smoke was creating a tornado. I was within 50 metres from this event and I could see it clearly. I took photographs of the smoke and the area where I was. At 5:31 p.m. on 30 December 2019, I took a photograph of the smoke spinning in the shape of Mount Jingellic. I was at the time on the property of Lightwood in the northern paddock. I'll just bring up now, Your Honour, that photograph that Mr Taylor took. Mr Taylor goes on to describe in his statement the following. We were driving down the laneway when the wind picked up from 60 kilometres per hour to 80 kilometres really quickly. Not much further the wind became stronger again. I was about 2 paddocks away from the main house, which is approximately 600 metres north of the house. I was heading south along the laneway when I saw a very large red gum tree disintegrate into small pieces and onto the ground, leaving a stump 5 metres high and 2 metres in width. Every branch and leaf and everything else of that tree was destroyed by the ferocity of the wind. RFS crewman Jason Mcbain was working with Peter Jed Taylor and described the fire's behaviour to police as follows. I couldn't say why at the time, but Jed began driving towards the main property. I assumed it was for property protection. We began travelling along a track towards the main house when I saw a large red box tree explode in front of my eyes. It was destroyed by wind. As I said, the wind had become extreme, and when I saw this tree explode in front of me, I realised what serious situation we were all in. I was still on the rear of the truck, and I saw a massive grass fire heading towards our location, coming from a paddock to the east of the house. This shows how unpredictable the situation was. There was fire coming from all angles. As the grass fire was approaching, I saw it change directions in 180 degrees. It changed from heading in a west direction to heading in an easterly direction immediately. I have never seen this occur before. The wind was that strong, it had changed the direction of an intense grass fire within a split second. I thought we were in danger of being overrun by the grass fire until it changed directions. Once it had, we drove over and extinguished all remaining flames. Your Honour, Albie Maris, RFS captain of the Gingelic RFS Brigade, took a series of photographs of the fire on the afternoon of 30 December 2019. And I'll just bring those up now. This photo, Your Honour, was taken at about 3:47 on the afternoon of the 30th of December 2019. Mr. Maris describes that at about this time his wife took this particular photograph from their front yard, and that the photograph depicts the fire coming over the mountain range heading towards the property at Light Wood. Your Honour, I'll then bring up the next photograph. Now, Your Honour, I apprehend that this particular photograph was taken at around about 5. I'll just go to the next photograph if we may. Just out of sequence, unfortunately, to that which was within the statement. There should be a photograph taken at 5:12 p.m. An extra G. We'll just move through the next one. Your Honour sees the plume developing in that photograph. This one, Your Honour, was taken at 5:34 p.m. And that photograph, Your Honour, is taken at 5:45 p.m, which is about the time it's believed that the fire-generated vortex has impacted with Mr. McPaul's fire truck. Your Honour, Ashley Drummond owns a farm on the Victorian side of the Murray River in between Mount Alfred and Walwa. Your Honour, the property of Lightwood, which is on River Road, Gingelic, is directly opposite Mr. Drummond's property, in the order of about 1.5 kilometres away. On that afternoon and early evening, Mr. Drummond took a number of photographs and that's in the order of about 1.5 kilometres heading in the general direction of the Lightwood property. If you want to go to the next photograph. Your Honour, this photograph again shows the fire burning in Green Valley. It was taken at about 4:02 p.m. on the 30th of December, and it's about 1 kilometre south of the Lightwood property. This photograph was taken by Mr. Drummond at about 4:30 p.m. on the 30th, and again, it's about 1 kilometre south of Lightwood, and shows the fire increasing in intensity. This particular photograph, Your Honour, was taken at 5:20 p.m. on the 30th of December. Again, it's 1 kilometre or thereabouts south of the Lightwood property, and Your Honour starts to see that the smoke's starting to upwell and form a plume or a column. The next photograph, Your Honour, was taken at about 5:23 p.m, again from much the same location, about 1 kilometre south of Lightwood. And then, I don't know whether we can bring that up, Your Honour, but that shows the general position. There's hard to see, but there's a letter A towards the end of a straight line, which is where Mr Drummond was standing at the time he took those various photographs. Your Honour, Scott Anderson, an RFS member for 35 years, was part of another RFS crew that attended Lightwood that afternoon. Mr Anderson observed the fire over the course of the afternoon and also took a series of photographs from about 5:30 p.m. that afternoon. I'll just have those brought up now, Your Honour. Mr Anderson in his statement describes this photograph as follows. I could see a large smoke plume that was dark in its core heading in our direction from the north. I took the photograph at 4:08 p.m. It was an extreme fire danger day with low humidity and temperatures in the mid-40s. From my position, there wasn't much wind at all. We remained in this location as directed. I don't recall who told us to go there, but we stayed for some time, keeping a lookout for spot fires. Then I come to the next photograph, which I understand is Annexure B to Mr Anderson's statement. In relation to this photograph, Mr Anderson took this at about 4:15 p.m, which again showed the fire front coming through the mountain range towards Lightwood. And then the next photograph, which is Annexure C, Mr Anderson took at about 4:21 p.m. on the 30th. He said that he could see the fire growing in intensity. The width, the density and the smoke had changed as the fire approached us. The fire core was getting darker as the minutes went by. The wind was still slight. He goes on to say that from his gliding experience, I could see the build-up of different air masses creating a fireball tornado and realised we were in a very dangerous situation. I was waving my arms around trying to get my crew's attention. The next photograph that Mr Anderson took was at about 5:24 p.m, which is Annexure D to his statement. He says that I watched my unit come back to my location and they picked me up. We parked up and looked at the fire. At this time, I saw the fire front roll over the hill and hit the mountain in front of us. The boys in my tanker told me that we'd been told on the radio to pull out of the area. Your Honour, the next photograph is Annexure E1, and Mr Anderson says this about this particular period of time. As I got into the truck, I took a photograph of the fire, which is what Your Honour sees now. The time of this photo was 5:35 p.m. And then Annexure E2, taken about the same time, shows a vehicle attempting to fight the spot fire at the base of the hill. Mr Anderson believes this was the coal can truck that Mr McPaul, Mr O'Keefe and Mr Good were in. Annexures F and G and the next few photos Again, I'll just slow down if we may. The flame height of the burning grassland as described by Mr Anderson was about 1/2 to 1 metre high. The smoke cloud was about 6 kilometres high above this location. Mr Anderson says that he could clearly see flames, smoke, leaf litter and grasses being sucked up into the smoke column. The smoke's mass was starting to curl around itself. The fireball above the lower flame height was about 300 metres high. And then if we could have annexure H and I, one displayed in turn, Mr Anderson says that this particular photograph, annexure H, was taken at about 5:36 p.m. from the same location as the earlier photograph. He says only a minute had gone by, but the fire was growing dramatically in size. The fire was twisting and sucking up towards the ridgeline, developing into a fireball, twister or tornado, getting ready to dump. It was building energy inside itself. I could clearly see smoke from the other spot fires starting, and their own smoke was being sucked towards the twirling smoke mass. I could see that the fire had curled over the backside of the hill, which created the vortex for the fire tornado to start. It had become a huge, swirling mass. The weather itself was quiet. It was still very warm, and the wind was almost still. There was no wind as the air was being pulled into the fire. And if we can then move, please, to a photograph annexure I2. This photograph shows a zoomed image. Just checking we've got annexure I number 2. If we don't, we might move to annexure J. Do we have annexure J? All right. It's important I get the sequence because Mr Anderson has described in some detail the development of the fire, and in particular the fire-generated vortex. Pardon me, Your Honour, I'll just sort out the...
Certainly.
I just inquired of my solicitor whether we now have on screen annexure I2. All right. This, I'm told, is annexure J. And this was taken at, Your Honour, at about 5:36. We then moved to annexure K. This photograph, annexure K, was taken at about 5:37 p.m. And Mr Anderson says we drove back in through the gate into the paddock. The fire at this time had changed dramatically in that minute. It was moving fast and in a southerly direction towards a gorge or valley on the side of the mountain in front of us. The curl has hit the valley, creating a rotor-type system, drawing more oxygen into the valley to its main fireball. As it was growing, it was increasing the wind strength, being sucked back up into it. And Your Honour, there's also then photograph L and M, which fits in with that description I've just read out. Then finally annexure N, again also taken at about 5:37 p.m. as the fire tornado appeared to have formed. The heat and energy had built dramatically. It was getting dark and sucking more air in. It looked like it was getting ready to drop as it was incredibly heavy. Your Honour, not long after this particular photograph was taken, Mr. Anderson and his crew left. He says, "We returned to the gate near the main residence of Lightwood. It was the same gate we had previously entered the paddock from. As we drove through the gate, I felt the tornado drop. A sudden gust of strong wind hit our truck. The truck was vibrating and moving about in the wind. I could hear trees cracking and see smoke and fire all around us. Visibility had dropped. I could hardly see anything. I could feel heat from the nearby fireball. At this time, we arrived at the main house for property protection duties." Your Honour, the owner of Lightwood property, Mr. Andrew Hicks, took the following photograph of his property at around 5:20 p.m. Your Honour, there is also a video, quite a graphic video, Your Honour, taken by Ashley Drummond, who was the gentleman who took some photographs from within Victoria, about 1.5 kilometres or there away from the property Lightwood. This particular video, Your Honour, which I'll play in a moment, captures the formation of the fire-generated vortex and conveys, as I said, dramatically and graphically, the sheer magnitude and force of this particular rare and extreme weather event. Just have that played one more time, Your Honour. It's only about 9 seconds. Your Honour sees the sheer height and width of this fire-generated vortex. Mr. Drummond, in his statement to police, Your Honour, says this about the video that Your Honour just saw. "When I noticed the strange behaviour of the fire, I began to record a video of its behaviour. At 5:24 p.m, I started recording the fire coming over the ridge. The video recording depicts the spot fires being sucked or drawn back towards the main fire, and it also depicts what appears to be when the main fire begins to twist and turn into what I could only describe as a fire tornado. At 5:30 p.m, I again began to record the fire on my phone. At the time of recording the video, I thought I was capturing, and this is the video Your Honour's just seen now, I thought I was capturing the same behaviour as the previous recordings. However, looking back at it, I noticed the video captures what I can describe as a fire tornado. The video is recorded at the same location as the previous recordings. However, it captures the fire twisting and moving towards my property. At the time of the recording, I would estimate the fire tornado was on the property of Lightwood, heading in between the homestead of Lightwood and Illawong to the west." Your Honour, as I've mentioned previously, at around 5:45 p.m, this fire-generated vortex and associated extreme winds struck the vehicle Colcan NW2A and caused it to overturn. This fire truck, Your Honour, was a 10-tonne Isuzu crew cab tabletop truck. Your Honour will see now two photographs of this particular vehicle that was overturned by those extreme winds generated by the fire-generated vortex that passed through Lightwood property at about 5:45 p.m. on Monday the 30th of December 2019. And Your Honour, the next photograph provides a better opportunity to appreciate the size and the weight of this particular truck that was overturned by those extreme winds generated by this rare fire event. Your Honour, a number of crew were injured, and of course RFS member Samuel Mcpaul was tragically killed. It is important to note that there is a considerable body of evidence in regard to the attendance of this RFS truck at Lightwood on the 30th of December 2019 and the tragic circumstances of this extreme and rare weather event. This evidence will be addressed in detail in the inquest into Mr Mcpaul's death, which will be heard tomorrow, Your Honour. Suffice to say that this weather event occurred and formed part of the progression of the Green Valley fire. Your Honour, I now propose to play to the court 4 short videos taken by residents of the area that evening. These videos demonstrate that some hours after the fire generator vortex occurred, the fire raged well into the night. The first photograph, Your Honour, is taken by Janice Newnham. The Newnhams reside in Walwa, Victoria, about 10 kilometres from the Green Valley area. This photograph, Your Honour, was taken at about 7:32 p.m. Your Honour, the next video was taken by Sasha Newnham, Janice's son, again on the 30th of December at around 7:33 p.m. Your Honour, the next video was taken by Janice Newnham at 7:42 p.m. on the 30th of December 2019, again on the Victorian side of the border, about 10 kilometres or thereabouts from the Green Valley area. And Your Honour, the final video that I'd like to show Your Honour was taken by Mr Chris Gates, a nearby property owner at Karumba. Mr Gates took this video from his paddock about 15 kilometres east from the Hicks property, that is the Lightwood property in New South Wales, and this was taken at about 8:55 p.m. on the 30th of December 2019.
That's, I think, the house at Coronial.
Your Honour, unfortunately, Mr Gates lost his home as a result of this particular fire. On 14 January 2020, Your Honour, investigating police conducted an investigation into the cause and origin of the fire. The court will hear shortly from Detective Sergeant Dane Creamers in regard to the likely cause and origin of the Green Valley fire. He is of the opinion that the likely area of origin was dense native bushland on the eastern side of a steep slope in the southwestern area of the Woomagama National Park. He is also of the opinion that there were 2 lightning strikes of interest at 4:28 p.m. on 29 December in that general vicinity. And Detective Creamers has provided a chart which identifies the general area of origin of this particular fire in Green Valley. Your Honour, there's also a report that's been prepared by RFS investigator Angus Bullough, who also conducted an examination of the area of origin. He concluded that the fire was caused by lightning and identified a particular tree that he considered was hit and where the fire started. He says in his report that the following, just read this passage out if I may. I'm just wondering whether we could bring up the photograph that Mr. Bullough took of the particular tree which he concludes was struck by lightning in the afternoon of the 29th of December 2019. Do we have that? No. All right. That's not been loaded into the system, Your Honour, so I apologise for that. Finally, Your Honour, the data obtained from investigating police demonstrates that in total 106 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with the Green Valley fire. Of these, 14 houses were destroyed in the Jingellic, Ernie and Talmalmo areas. There was also a huge loss in regards to the destruction of the pine plantation and its associated machinery owned by Hume Forest Limited. Your Honour, that concludes my opening remarks. If it's convenient, Your Honour, could I firstly tender the brief of evidence in respect of the Green Valley fire, and if that could be marked Exhibit 11A.
Yes, I do that. 11A.
Thank you. And finally, if it's convenient to Your Honour, could I also tender the brief of evidence relating to the inquest into the death of Samuel McPaul, and if that could please be marked, Your Honour, Exhibit 12.
Yes, that will be Exhibit 12.
Your Honour, that concludes the procedural matters. Could I please call Detective Acting Inspector Alcanza?
Silence, please. Do swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will bear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If so, please say I do.
I do.
Have a seat. Thank you, Detective.
Detective Acting Inspector, would you please state your full name?
Hassan Alcanza.
And would you please indicate to Her Honour what position you presently hold within New South Wales Police?
I'm a team leader at the Arson Unit State Crime Command.
Can I ask you this initially? Have you had any involvement in relation to the investigation conducted by New South Wales Police into the Green Valley Talmalmo bushfire in 2019-2020?
Yes, I have. I'm in a supervisory role above a number of those bushfire investigations, of which Paul Blanche was the initial OIC of this investigation.
And Detective Senior Constable Paul Blanche, as you said a moment ago, was assigned as the officer in charge to investigate the cause and origin in relation to this particular fire.
He was.
And do I understand that Detective Senior Constable Blanche is no longer employed by New South Wales Police?
That's correct.
Can I ask you firstly to set out, if you wouldn't mind, Detective Acting Inspector, your experience in relation to the investigation of fire generally, and then more specifically in relation to wildfire or bushfire?
I've been attached to the Arson Unit as a senior constable for about 5 or 6 years. I then returned as a detective sergeant. I've been in that role for the past 10 years. I've probably investigated in excess of 100 bushfires in my time at the Arson Unit.
Thank you. And more recently, were you involved in the investigation into the cause and origin of a bushfire that impacted the township of Tathra in 2018.
That's correct.
Have you before you a copy of Detective Senior Constable Blanche's statement dated the 18th of March 2021?
I do.
What I'd like to deal with firstly is if you could just describe in general terms the geography of the area where it's thought the ignition point was in respect to this particular fire.
It is dry sclerophyll forest. It is an area known as the Woomagama National Park, also bordering a property known as Avoca, and also a pine plantation owned by Hume Forests. It is a mountainous area at the point of origin, which has limited vehicular access, in that the fire trails in that area are fairly basic, and you would require a specialist vehicle to get into that environment.
Yes. And this particular national park, the Woomagama National Park, is that situated about 20 kilometres southeast of the township of Holbrook?
That's right.
And to your understanding, is this particular national park about 30 kilometres northeast of the town of Albury on the border of the Victorian New South Wales border?
Yes, it is.
Now, as part of the investigation conducted by Detective Senior Constable Blanche, did he obtain some data in relation to lightning strikes in this particular area that you've just described on the afternoon of the Sunday, the 29th of December 2019?
Yes, he did.
And was that lightning data obtained from a specialist organisation based in Canberra known as GPATS?
That's correct.
And do you know what the reliability of that lightning strike data is within certain parameters?
I've been told that it's within sort of a 95% accuracy. There are variables based on the terrain, based on where the sensors are actually located, but I've been told it's 95% accurate. You can actually have more lightning strikes hitting the ground than indicated. So if it might indicate one strike, depending on the fingers of that lightning strike, more areas of the ground may have been impacted, but it's all environment dependent, and that specific event, that lightning event, is specific to different environments at different times.
And in terms of a GPS coordinate, what's the radius for error in relation to the location of a particular lightning strike? Do you know whether it's 200 metre radius or thereabouts?
It's within a couple of 100 metres, but I wouldn't have that exact data at my disposal at the moment.
And as part of Detective Senior Constable Blanche's investigation, he obviously took a number of statements from local residents in that area. And from his investigations, did he discern that Kelly and Eves Skytler, who live on River Road, Taumamo, received notifications on a lightning strike app that indicated that there were 3 strikes in the general area to which we've just referred a moment ago?
That's right.
And that in relation to that and the data that was obtained from GPAT, were there 2 particular strikes recorded in that general area bordering the Avoca property, the Pine Plantation, and also the Woomagama National Park at about 4:28 p.m?
That's correct.
On the 29th of December 2019?
Yes.
Now, to your understanding, RFS attended the fire fairly early after it was called in on 000 by Kylie Scheitler?
They did. At about 5:04, I understand it was, the 000 call was made by the Scheitlers, and 5:06 p.m. RFS logged it as an incident, smoke sighting incident on their system, and units were deployed from that point.
Right. And is it your understanding, Acting Inspector, that when the RFS first arrived, the fire was perhaps 10 to 15 acres in size?
That's correct.
And hadn't taken a run, hadn't started to run at that point in time?
No, it hadn't.
Do you recall what the conditions were like, where the conditions or fireground conditions were at about that time that the RFS have attended the fireground?
The weather was warm. I understand somewhere in the vicinity of 40 degrees Celsius. It was dry, relative low humidity. and moderate winds at that point.
Now, RFS crews remained at the fire overnight. Did conditions change the following morning, that is Monday the 30th of December 2019?
Yes, they did. The wind picked up throughout the morning to around midday, 2 o'clock, where the winds were quite aggressive, up to about 50 kilometres per hour. And the fire took a significant run throughout the day of the 30th of December.
And were those winds, to your understanding, prevailing from the north-northwest?
They were.
And the fire was heading or progressing in a general south-easterly direction?
That's right.
Towards the Murray River and that area around the Lightwood property, which we've seen displayed this morning.
Correct.
Now, at some point, did the fire break its containment lines?
Yes, it did.
And was that somewhere, to your understanding, between 2 and 3 p.m. on the Monday, the 30th of December?
That's right.
And at that point in time, were the RFS crews, in effect, then directed to protect property?
They were.
All right. Now, did the wind change, or were there environmental changes after about 3 p.m. which increased the fire intensity and behaviour of this particular fire?
Well, as I mentioned, the wind velocity picked up, but just before the generation of the fire-generated vortex, the wind, or the natural wind, had decreased.
Yes.
At that point, and that was where the observation started in relation to the creation of the fire-generated vortex, and a combination of those effects, the rising column of heat, the pyrocumulus cloud, and those moderate winds assisted the formation of the fire-generated vortice.
From your understanding and analysis of the investigation carried out by New South Wales Police, did that fire-generated vortex start to develop in the sort of late afternoon of Monday the 30th of December?
It did.
And from your investigations and understanding of the brief of evidence compiled by your former colleague, Detective Senior Constable Blanche, did it impact a fire truck on the Lightwood property at about 5:45 p.m?
It did.
And was that fire truck known as Colcan NW2A?
That's right.
And were there 3 occupants within that truck?
It was.
And was that a 10-tonne Isuzu cable
Yes, it was.
truck, cabin tabletop truck?
Yes.
And was the driver Mr. Andrew Good?
Yes.
And were there 2 other crewmen on that truck, being Mr. O'Keefe?
Correct.
And then Samuel McPaul?
That's right.
And from the expert evidence that has been gathered by New South Wales Police, including from the Bureau of Meteorology, is it thought that the truck was hit by winds in excess of 220 kilometres per hour?
That's right.
Perhaps much greater?
Yes.
And that has caused the truck to roll over?
Yes.
There's absolutely no suggestion, is there, of any driver error in relation to this particular rollover incident?
No suggestion at all.
It was just a rare and extreme fire event that happened to hit this particular truck at a particular moment in time.
It was.
Do you, from your understanding of the brief of evidence, confirm that the cause of Mr. McPaul's death was traumatic asphyxia?
That's right.
In terms of the progression of the fire, after the fire-generated vortex has passed through that general area around the Lightwood property, what was the general progression of the fire thereafter, to your understanding?
Over the course of the day, or
Yes.
the end of the fire?
Just over the course of the day, and then more generally until it was declared out.
The fire travelled in a southeasterly direction and across the New South Wales Victorian border. On the 30th, the fire travelled 25 kilometres in that 24-hour period. And then the day following that, it travelled a further 45 kilometres. So to travel 70 kilometres in a 2-day period is a significant movement of fire, showing that, you know, its progression is significant. It's not what we would see in normal fire progression. Then over the course of the remaining 50 odd days, because the first 3 days were the most significant, it ran for 53 days in total. You know, on varying days, it just travelled through Victoria and remaining parts of New South Wales. Some days it would travel a couple of kilometres, other days it would travel up to 8 or 10 kilometres in a day. But the first 3 days were the most significant part of that fire.
And was it in those first 3 days or thereabouts that the townships of Jingellic, Ernie and Talmalmo were impacted by this fire?
Yes.
And from your understanding of the brief of evidence compiled by Detective Senior Constable Paul Blanche, were there 14 homes lost in those general areas that I've just referred to?
That's right.
And in total there were 106 structures?
Yes.
And was there significant damage to the Hume Forest plantation?
Yeah, somewhere in the order of $69 million worth of damage.
Both in terms of trees and also plant and machinery?
That's right.
And was that figure solely related to the Green Valley fire, or did that also include other fires such as the Duns Road fire?
Yeah, Duns Road was incorporated in that figure.
In terms of the cause and origin of this particular fire, having read the evidence of the fire investigators, bringing your own independent mind to bear, do you agree with their conclusions that the more likely cause of the fire was lightning strike?
I do.
And why is that?
Given the close, well, starting right back at the first observations of the fire, you know, right from the point of hearing the lightning strikes, seeing the lightning data on the app, seeing the first sighting of the smoke, the aviation asset sighting the smoke in the proximity of those lightning strikes.
Just pausing there, that's the photograph they're on a scene this morning taken by Parks Victoria about an hour and 3/4 after the lightning strikes at about 4:28 p.m.
That's right. And then combining that with the forensic work done by RFS and New South Wales Police tracking the fire to an area of origin in close proximity to those lightning strikes, and then being able to rule out other causes of those fires, it is my view that the fire was caused by lightning.
And as you just touched upon then a moment ago, Detective Acting Inspector, other possible causes of ignition have been excluded both by New South Wales Police and RFS, including human activity.
That's right.
Yeah. Is there anything you wish to say further before I see whether there's other questions from other parties?
Nothing I have to say.
Thank you, Your Honour. That concludes my examination.
Thank you. We'll just see if there's any questions. Mr. Free.
No, thank you, Your Honour.
Mr. Glascott.
I understand, Your Honour, that Mr. Sakalis,
Mr. Glascott's.
has no questions of this witness.
Thank you, Mr. Sakalis.
Your Honour, I note the time, if it's convenient, if we could take the morning adjournment just to check the technology for the next two witnesses.
All right. We'll adjourn and come back at 20 to 12.
My pleasure, Your Honour.
Your Honour, before doing so, could I just raise one issue? Would I be able to be excused? I don't expect to have any questions for the witnesses today, just hoping that I could be excused from the proceedings for today. I expect to log back in tomorrow.
Yes, Mr. Sakalis, certainly.
There are people watching on my behalf on the YouTube stream, and I am available at short notice if required.
Thank you. We'll adjourn.
Please all stand. Coroners Act adjourned. Silence, please, all stand. Coroners Court has resumed.
Yes, Mr Castleton.
Thank you, Your Honour. I call Detective Sergeant Dane Creemers.
Detective Cremers, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Your Honour.
All right, you'll just hear from the court officer now about whether to take an oath or an affirmation.
Detective Sergeant
oath.
Cremus, I'm going to swear you in. Do you wish to take the oath or the affirmation?
Oath, thank you.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Detective, would you please state your full name?
Dane Robert Creemers, Kremers.
Thank you. And do you presently hold the rank of Detective Sergeant within New South Wales Police?
That's correct.
And are you presently attached to the Albury crime scene section within New South Wales Police?
That's correct.
And were you allocated the role of officer in charge to investigate the cause and origin of a fire known as the Green Valley Malmo wildfire?
Yes, I was.
Do you have with you this morning a copy of your statement that you've provided in relation to this matter, dated the 23rd of October 2020, but signed by you, it appears, on the 15th of January 2021?
That is correct.
Can I ask you firstly, please, Detective, just to set out your training, qualifications and experience in relation to the investigation of fire, and in particular wildfire or bushfire?
Yes, I was trained in wildfire investigation through the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command back in 2008. My other qualifications are General Crime Scene Examination, Cert 4, Structural Fire Course from the Forensic Evidence Services Group, a Diploma of Forensic Investigation and Public Safety, and the Advanced Diploma of Public Safety.
Thank you. When did you first become involved in relation to the investigation of the Green Valley fire?
My first involvement was, I believe, around the 6th of January when I first entered the fireground near Gingellic.
And did you enter the fireground at that time to commence investigations and examinations in relation to the possible cause of this particular fire or not?
I was initially attempting to get into the original fireground to investigate the area of origin, but was unable to due to the fireground still being quite active at that time.
Pausing there, if we may, how did you discern at that point in time, that is 6 January 2020, what a likely area of origin was for the ignition of this fire?
At that point of time, I'd just been advised that the area was over near the southeast corner of the Maragama State Forest, and that was as much information I had at that point of time.
Did you subsequently learn that there may have been lightning strikes in that general area on the afternoon of the 29th of December 2019?
Yes, that was in the following days.
Were you able to access the fire ground at some point in time?
Yes, I was.
And when was that?
I think initially the 14th of January.
And before you went to the fire ground on foot, were you able to, at some point in time, conduct an aerial inspection of the fire ground?
I conducted aerial examination of the fire ground afterwards.
Right. And in terms of your ground-based inspection, did you deploy a particular methodology to try and understand where the general area of origin was for this ignition?
Well, our general methodology in relation to wildfire examination is to commence on the boundary of the fire and work our way inwards from the areas of most destruction, working our way into the least areas of destruction. Unfortunately, the nature and size of this fire would have made the logistics of doing that approach rather drawn out and would have taken weeks to eventually work methodically back to that way. That's where I sourced the information from the RFS in relation to lightning strikes and first responders' initial observations to narrow down that area. Once I had a general area of origin, I came into the ground, started identifying existing fire indicators to try and work my way methodically following these indicators into a general area of origin with the hope of finding a point of origin.
Now, as you were undertaking that process, was there any difficulty encountered by you as a result of conflicting fire indicators because of transition fire or not?
That's correct. There was, due to the nature of the fire originally and from RFS reports from the initial spread of the fire, commencing and progressing the head of the fire, moving to the west to the northwest for a period of a day approximately before the fire turned and weather conditions turned, causing the fire to come back across the original fire ground, which unfortunately alters existing fire indicators which would have been present if the fire continued to move west or northwest. And that was the difficulty with this area of origin.
Was that one of the difficulties that led to you being unable to identify a specific point of ignition?
That is correct. And I was not able to definitively define a tree that was struck as a result of the documented lightning strikes, just due to the nature of damage to this general area of origin.
In circumstances where you've attended the fire ground some 16 days or thereafter after the suspected ignition, what, if any, impact would that time period have on fire indicators on the ground?
That would have quite a lot of impact on fire indicators, even though charring would still be visible, sooting would still be visible, but a lot of damaged foliage, leaves, branches would have come down, broken, weakened as a result of the initial fire and commenced to alter what possible indicators that they were.
Yes. Could you describe the general terrain of the general area of origin based on your inspection of it on the 14th of January?
The general terrain where the identified area of origin was an extremely steep slope on the eastern side. I'm not sure offhand the actual name of the slope that it was on, but it was a very steep rise that was very inaccessible by even four-wheel drive vehicles. There was a couple of logging tracks cut along the ridge, the crest of the ridge, plus halfway down the actual slope, and few minor logging tracks within that area. We had to park 1.5 kilometres away to the northwest and then get to this area by foot. It was not readily accessible by normal vehicles, and the road in was completely blocked.
I might just have displayed now a photograph, which is photograph 1, as part of your statement. It's page 176 of Exhibit 11A. I'll just have that brought up for you, Detective Sergeant.
Yes, I have that photo in front of me.
Thank you. Now, is that an aerial view generally west, showing the area of origin on the eastern side of that ridge that you've just described in your evidence a moment ago?
That's correct. Centrally in that photo on that ridge is the general area of origin.
And having been there on foot, and having viewed it in the air, what sort of gradient are we talking about in terms of that slope that we see there in photograph 1 on page 176 of Exhibit 11A?
I would roughly estimate it between a 30 to 35 degree angle.
Thank you, Detective. I'll now have displayed photograph 17 of your statement, which is found at page 192 of Exhibit 11A.
Yes, I have that photo.
And is that the view on the western side of the ridge that we just saw a moment ago?
That is correct.
And that's an aerial view generally looking north? And
that's correct.
do I understand that the area of origin observed is to the right side of the tree line on the right side of the photograph?
That's correct.
And on the other side of that ridge line is the general area we saw a moment ago depicted in photograph number 1?
On the right side, yes, that's correct.
Yes, thank you. I'll then, if we could then go to page 156. Now this is chart 1 of your statement, Detective Sergeant. Now, that's a satellite image of the general area. We see there the national park to which you referred a moment ago, and you've identified in this particular satellite image the area of origin.
Yes, that's correct.
And there's some other markers on that satellite imagery. The red one, just I take it, is to show where the Jingellic township is. In general terms?
It identifies the area of Jingellic there, but further across to your right, that identification of the Jingellic pub is the main area of where Jingellic residents are.
Thank you. Now, if we then move to page 158 of Exhibit 11A, which is chart 2, Detective, to your statement, do we see there a number of markers which are circular, blue in colour with the internal part white? Do they depict lightning strikes that went through this area on the 29th of December 2019?
Yes, that's correct.
And from your investigations, were there in the order of perhaps 19 strikes in that general area on that day?
In the area that I defined here, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And were those lightning strikes, to your understanding, recorded between about 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. on the 29th of December 2019?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, there's a red marker between 2 blue lightning strike markers. Does that denote the area of origin based on your ground-based inspection together with the lightning strike data you obtained from GPATs?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, if we then move to page 162 of Exhibit 11A, to your chart 3, Detective Sergeant, do we see there a closer view of the area of origin situated somewhere between those 2 recorded lightning strikes at 4:28 p.m. on the 29th of December 2019?
Yes, that is correct.
Just returning now, if I may, to your aerial inspection that you conducted on the 15th of January, did that confirm, if at all, your conclusion as to the area of origin of this particular ignition or not?
Yes, in confirmation with the preceding advice that I'd received and documentation that I'd received, yes, it did.
And why was that, Detective Sergeant?
Just the recency of the photograph from Vic Park's helicopter in relation to the time of the reported strike to the time it attended to when the wildfire was in its incipient stage on the eastern side of the slope, to the point the actual times reported by the Lankeys Creek fire crew as to their initial attendance and their initial observations. And just in culmination with my ground examination in that area, with indicators pointing that there was a subsequent meandering fire within that area for a period of time before it breached the western edge of the peak.
Thank you. As we know, you've concluded that the most likely cause of the ignition was lightning. How did you go about excluding other possible causes of this ignition?
I looked through the actual, whilst conducting my foot examination in the large area of the suspected area of origin, I was looking for any introduced items in the area which were not natural to the area. I was looking for cans, possible wheel tyre marks, cigarette lighters, cigarette butts, anything that was out of the ordinary for that area for it being such a remote area. During the course of the examination and subsequent foot search around that area, I did not find any other possible sources of ignition, though looking for a possible introduction of an accelerant into that area, I would not have been able to find that due to the level of fire that had gone through that area.
Thank you. In terms of damage to property, were there in the order of 14 homes throughout Taumalmo, Jingellic and Ernie destroyed by this particular fire?
Without actually looking at my properties that I assessed, I'd be unable to tell you, but yes, there were a lot.
What I might do, Detective, is just to have brought up on the screen page 172 of Exhibit 11A, which is a map produced by New South Wales Police. And it may not be clear, and please let me know if it's not, but do you see just north of the Murray River, you'll see the townships of Taumalmo, Jingellic, Ernie and the Lake, Lankeys Creek. Do you see a number of dots coloured in crimson?
Yes.
Do those crimson dots mark those properties that were destroyed as a result of the Green Valley fire, to your understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
And for those who aren't familiar with this particular area, if we look at the western edge of the fire, slightly to the left of Taumalmo, that is the west of Taumalmo, across to Ernie in the east, what sort of distance are we contemplating between those 2 points, 2 townships? And if
it'd be very close to the vicinity of 50 to 60 kilometres from east to west.
Thank you. And again, I apologise for putting you on the spot, but if you know, in terms of the northernmost reaches of the fire, that is sort of north of Lankeys Creek down to the New South Wales border, that is the Murray River, what sort of distance in kilometres are we looking at?
I think probably close to about 40 kilometres, maybe 45 kilometres.
Thank you, Detective. Now, finally, I just wanted to deal with the weather conditions, and this might be best done by bringing up the table that's contained within your statement, which is found at page 131 of Exhibit 11A. And this is weather data that I understand was collated at the Albury Airport, at the weather station there. Now, again, how many kilometres is Albury Airport from the general area of origin for this particular fire?
Albury Airport's about 60 kilometres west of the actual area of origin.
Now, do you know whether the weather that was recorded in the afternoon of the 29th of December at Albury Airport was consistent with reports of weather on the ground around the area of origin or not?
I was advised that the actual fire, the weather reports that were predicted and that did occur from Albury Airport were consistent through to the fire ground.
Thank you. If we just focus on that afternoon, that is the weather data for the afternoon of the 29th of December, are there particular features of that weather data that are considered conducive to bushfire behaviour from your experience?
Yes, my experience in relation to that data that was collected is the very low relative humidity for the area and the extremely high temperatures, which are both conducive factors to a wildfire.
And also, is it considered, again, based on your experience, that a north to northwest wind is considered a bad wind for fire?
Yes, it is.
And then, if we just go down to the bottom part of your table, Detective Sergeant, to the late afternoon of the 30th of December, as you know, this was the particular time period where a fire-generated vortex occurred on the property known as Lightwood. Again, do you see there concerning data in relation to relative humidity being quite low, 7 to 8%?
Yes, that's correct. Extremely low relative humidity, very high temperatures in the fire ground and very high wind speeds.
Yes, and what we see there is consistent with what you said in your evidence earlier, that there was a change in wind direction between the time of ignition until that fire-generated vortex has passed through that area from north to northwest, and then it's gradually swung around to southwest to west to west to south, and that's led to the progression across the Murray River, has it not?
That's correct.
Yes, thank you, Detective. They're my questions.
Yes. Mr. Free, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, Detective. Excused.
Thank you very much, Your Honour.
Well, thank you. I apprehend that Mr. Angus Bullough, RFS fire investigator, is in the virtual courtroom, and if he could be called, please, to give evidence.
Yes. Mr. Bullough, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Your Honour.
All right. You'll just hear from the court officer now.
Mr. Bull, I'm going to swear you in. Do you wish to take the oath for the affirmation?
Oath, please.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Mr. Bullough, would you please state your full name?
Angus John Bullough.
And what is your present occupation?
I'm currently employed by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service as the Acting Arson Intelligence Coordinator.
Thank you. And did you, as part of your role as an RFS employee, prepare a fire investigation report in relation to the cause and origin of a fire known as the Green Valley Talmalmo fire?
I did.
Do you have a copy of your report with you today?
I do.
Have you read your report recently?
Yes.
And do you adhere to the opinions that you've expressed therein?
I do. However, there is one error I have noted in the brief I've been provided.
And what is that error, sir?
On pages 207 to 213, and that's the red numbering, the maps in my report or in the one I've been provided, appear to be cut off and doesn't actually contain the full maps. I did provide that to RFS Council on the 31st of August. So that's pages 207 to 213.
Thank you. Just dealing with 207, whilst we're on that topic, as one looks at the page, one sees 2 lightning strike markers recorded in the bottom half of that photograph, correct? Nearest towards the bottom of the page?
Yes, correct. I'm just comparing it with the full-size map.
And are they, to your understanding, the lightning strikes that were recorded in that area at about 4:28 p.m. on the 29th of December 2019?
That is correct.
Were you armed with that data at the time that you undertook your inquiry into the cause and origin of this fire?
Yes.
Prior to attending the fireground to undertake your examination, had you obtained evidence from witnesses who observed the evolution of that fire on the afternoon of the 29th of December?
No, I had not.
Prior to attending the fireground, apart from lightning strike data, what, if any, other evidence did you have at your disposal to assist you in identifying the area of origin for this particular fire?
I've been provided with the Parks Victoria photo that was taken approximately 2 hours after the fire had started. And then I also had an initial fire map that was created in another record in our RFS reporting system that was later merged with the Green Valley Talmalmo incident. So I had that map in the Parks Victoria map, Parks Victoria photo.
You can take it from me that Her Honour has seen the Parks Victoria photograph that was taken at about 6:14 p.m. The other map to which you referred, which was stored within the RFS system, do I take it that's the icon system you're referring to?
That is.
Have you annexed that map to your statement or not?
I have indeed. I will just find the relevant number for you. It's page 212.
212, thank you. And what is it about this particular map that we see, page 212, that assisted you in narrowing down a possible area of origin before you attended the fireground?
So this is an initial map that I believe was created based off the Parks Victoria photo by the incident management team located back at Albury. However, it was not ground truthed to the best of my knowledge.
Before you undertook the ground-based inspection, did you inspect the fireground from the air or not?
I did.
And was that able to assist you in any way to narrowing down the likely area of origin for this particular ignition or not?
It was.
And how was that?
Look, visibility was low. However, the aircraft was able to take me over the general identified area using the latitude and longitude off the Parks Victoria photo. We were able to circle that area and I was able to observe advancing fire runs to both the east and the west. And during those aerial observations, we did note a tree that appeared to be struck by lightning.
I'll return to that in a moment. Did you undertake that aerial inspection on the 12th of January 2020?
I did, from approximately 10:15 hours till 10:45 hours.
And did you then attend the fireground the following day to undertake your ground-based inspection?
I had on the 11th done a cross-section of the fire, but I hadn't attended the general area of origin specifically. However, on the 12th of January, I undertook my detailed examination to the general area of origin.
Was it a difficult area to access on the 12th, Mr. Bullo, or not?
Yes, it was.
What were some of the difficulties that you encountered to get to that sort of likely general area of origin for this particular fire?
So I spent approximately half a day on the 11th of January clearing trails and access to ensure safe access and egress to the area of interest. It was extremely steep and rugged terrain as well. Even my four-wheel drive struggled to get through there.
And I take it using GPS coordinates, you're able to then locate yourself in that general area, having regard to the Parks Victoria photograph and lightning strike data, do I take it?
Correct.
Now, did you utilise any particular fire investigation methodology when you visited the fire ground on the 12th of January 2020 or not?
I did. Sorry.
I was simply going to ask, what was that methodology?
Within the RFS, we use a recognised methodology where we conduct a external examination, either in a clockwise and then counterclockwise or vice versa, around a suspected general area of origin to try establish fire runs. Once we establish that fire run or establish a run that we choose to follow, we then use what's called a serpentine pattern, where we walk in basically an S shape, gathering clusters of indicators or like indicators of either advancing, backing or lateral fire movement till we get down to a specific area of origin, and then we repeat that process.
From your examination, were there conflicting fire indicators in that general area of origin that you encountered on the 12th of January 2020 or not?
Certainly the macro indicators were quite conflicting, and I had to rely on micro indicators.
Right. Pausing there, what are the macro indicators to which you just referred?
Sorry. So macro indicators are large-scale indicators of either advancing, backing or lateral fire movement. Some examples of what I saw on that scene were angle of char, particularly, where fire will go across a surface and wrap around the back of it and create an angle pointing upwards into the direction of which the fire is travelling.
In terms of the micro fire indicators that you're able to identify, did they lead you to a specific point of origin in respect of the ignition of this fire? They
did. They led me back to a specific area of origin through the use of angle of char on grass stems and sooting and staining.
And was that specific area of origin a tree that, from your examination, appeared to have been struck by lightning?
Through my experience and training, yes.
And what were the particular features of this tree that led you to the conclusion that it, more probably than not, had been struck by lightning and may have been the source of the ignition of the Green Valley fire?
This tree in particular had suffered a natural break in that the wood was very fragmented and lots of splinters on it, as opposed to a mechanical break where you can see chainsaw marks and the like. The other interesting thing of note is that it hadn't burnt up through the internals of the tree, which would occur during a fire if it has been burning for a long time. And most importantly, I did observe a very small gouge mark near the base of the tree, and the internals of the tree hadn't burnt as well, even with the fire passing back through. And it's my experience with lightning causes that despite fire being around the area, for whatever reason, the trees where it has been struck by lightning does not actually burn.
Thank you. I'll just see whether we can have brought up page 222 of Exhibit 11A, which I apprehend is a photograph that you took, Mr. Bullo, of this particular tree to which you've just described in your evidence.
I see the photo.
And is that the tree that you formed the conclusion was the likely point of origin for the ignition of this fire?
Yes.
And in terms of its general location, is it on the eastern side of the slope that leads up to the ridge line that one sees in the Parks Victoria photograph?
It is.
And having been out there and conducted your ground-based inspection, what sort of gradient are we talking about in that area?
Look, it varies, but at that particular point in this photograph, I would say the gradient varies from roughly 30 to 35 degrees, but that would be an approximation.
Fair to say it's relatively steep country.
Yes, it is.
And do I understand your report accurately that you recorded the GPS coordinates of that particular tree that we see in photograph number D?
D009?
D009 on page 222?
Yes.
And those have then been plotted onto a map that depicts the actual or specific area of origin in relation to this fire.
Yes.
Now, finally, having been out there, what steps, if any, did you take to exclude other possible causes for the ignition of this fire?
If you just bear with me one moment, I'll just refer to my notes if that's okay.
Certainly.
So campfire was eliminated. I did not observe any evidence of campfires or makeshift campsites in the area. And given the ruggedness and remoteness of the terrain, I deemed it unlikely that someone would have a campfire there.
Thank you. And similarly, did you reach the same conclusion in relation to smoking?
Yes, smoking, a very similar conclusion. However, I did not observe any debris of cigarette butts or any packaging in the general area of origin either.
And do I understand that based on your inspection, you excluded the following possible causes of ignition being debris burning?
Correct.
Equipment use?
Correct.
Suspicious human behaviour, such as there being no evidence of incendiary devices?
Yes.
And of course, as you've described, given the area to which you were in being rugged, inaccessible bushland, there was no sign of, for example, power lines or other activity that could have led to this ignition.
Yeah, no sign of power lines or no rail in the area as well.
I take it then that you formed the view that on the balance of probabilities, the most likely cause of this fire was a lightning strike.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. There may be some other questions.
Mr. Free.
No questions, Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Borlo. You're free to go. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Your Honour, that concludes the evidence today. Tomorrow, there are a number of witnesses scheduled to give evidence. The first witness tomorrow is Mr. Mark Reeves, an RFS member, who will be the last witness called in relation to Your Honour's inquiry into the Green Valley fire. At the conclusion of Mr. Reeves' evidence, I'll make some preliminary submissions in relation to cause and origin, and then, with Your Honour's leave, I'll seek to open the inquest into the death of Samuel McPaul, and there are 4 witnesses scheduled to be called tomorrow in relation to that inquest. The first, Mr. Matthew Hicks, RFS Group Captain, then Mr. Rodney O'Keefe, who was one of the passengers or crewmen of Mr. McPaul's truck that was overturned by that fire-generated vortex, and then Mr. Andrew Good, who was the driver of the Colcan NW2A truck that was overturned. And as Your Honour heard from Acting Inspector today, that there's absolutely no evidence that would possibly suggest that there was any driver error in relation to what occurred on the Lightwood property as a result of that fire-generated vortex. And then finally, the last witness for tomorrow is Senior Constable Lester from the New South Wales Police. Your Honour, that's all I wish to say, if it pleases the Court.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Castleton. We'll adjourn now and resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow.